We're learning the third Sikha on Parshas Vaeira in Chelek Chaf Aleph on page 45. The shir today is being learned L'Nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rabbi Menashe Koltman. The Kviyas Haftarah von Asedre is Me'inyan Parsha. The Haftarah that's chosen for a Parsha is chosen from Psukim and Navi that discuss a similar subject to what's discussed in the Parsha. Valpia Yedua, and according to what it's known as Betchila, is Kriyas HaHaftarah nistaken geworden, anstatt der Kriyas HaParsha from the Shabbos. The reason why they would read the Haftarah in the first place, it was instituted in a time period when there was a decree that they weren't able to read the Parsha of the week, and in its place, they would read the Haftarah. So it's verstandig, so it's understood as the Haftarah darf sein minyan Parsha. So if it's taking the place of the Parsha itself, so the Haftarah must be from the same subject of the Parsha, and therefore it could replace it. Darf man verstehen in the Haftarah from the heintige Sedre, Vaeira. So therefore, based on this, we need to understand when we take a look at the Haftarah of this week's Parsha Vaeira. The Haftarah is Keleles Tzvei Inyanim Nevuas Tzia Cheskel. The Haftarah includes two subjects, 2 points that are prophecies to Yecheskel. Aleph, the first point is the Nevuah Al Pari Melech Mitzrayim Val Mitzrayim Kula. There's a prophecy regarding Pari, the king of Mitzrayim, and regarding the country of Mitzrayim. As the Rebishter vet Charav Machan Eretz Mitzrayim, the Rebishter will destroy the land. Bizas Afilu Nachdem Vivishafti Yeshvus Mitzrayim. And the Haftarah continues that even after a number of years, and Hashem will bring back the people to Mitzrayim, Vetizayna Mamloche Shvela, but nevertheless there'll be a lowly kingdom. Und durch dem, and then through this, V'yedu Kol Yeshve Mitzrayim Ki Ani Avaya. All the inhabitants of Mitzrayim will know that who Hashem is. That's one point in the Haftarah. Bey is another point. The Nevuah wegen Nebuchadrezzar Melech Bavel. The prophecy regarding Nebuchadrezzar, the king of Bavel, as the father was Eret Leichel Gewen Tzur, because he conquered the city of Tzur, and the Eibishter wanted that the city should be conquered, that in the Eibishter geben schar Pa'ula, Hashem will reward him for this action, as Eretz Mitzrayim v'nosa meinegayim, that he'll be able to conquer the land Mitzrayim, and he'll carry and take all of their wealth. That's the second point. Is nit glatik, so this is not clearly understood. Fishel mit der erste Nevuah is minyan Parsha. The first point is a similar subject to what the Parsha speaks about. In Parshas Vaeira, Retzach wegen die Makis, was the Rebbe hat gebracht auf Mitzrayim, because in the Parsha it speaks about the plagues that were brought on the Mitzrayim. Was durch den v'yoda Mitzrayim keni avaya, and that caused that they came to know who Hashem is. Just like it says here regarding the fact that Mitzrayim will be destroyed, and then they'll know Hani avaya. Aber the zweite Nevuah, the second prophecy, is doch teichna. The content is as me vet geben schar zu Nebuchadrezzar verleuchtet sein Tzur. That Nebuchadrezzar will be rewarded for the fact that he conquered Tzur. What's the connection of this concept, of this subject, to the Parsha, Vaeira? Now, v'afal as sein schar is gewen, kanal, was mot ihm abgegeben Eretz Mitzrayim. Now, the reward was the fact that he was able to then conquer the land of Mitzrayim. So seemingly it is related to the Parsha that speaks about Mitzrayim. Is Aleph, but number one, this is not a prat on an Inyan Tafel. The fact that it happens to be that the reward was that he was given Mitzrayim, that's a detail. It's not specifically Mitzrayim, but it's just the fact that he's rewarded for conquering the city Tzur. Beis, Nachmer, Nesinas Mitzrayim biyadai, the fact that Hashem allowed him to conquer Mitzrayim is nit me'inyan Parsha. It's not similar to a subject that's mentioned in the Parsha. Vor in the Parsha, wird nicht gered wegen abgeben Mitzrayim la'cherim. In the Parsha, there's no mention of Mitzrayim being given away to another kingdom. That there was the plagues in the Parsha, the Yedu Mitzrayim, the recognition of the Eibishter, but not anything about Mitzrayim being conquered. So why is the second point included in the Haftarah? How is this me'inyan Parsha as well? The beer in them. So the explanation for this is, so the Rabbi gives an introduction to have a deeper understanding. What does it mean that the Haftarah is me'inyan Parsha? The Pirish Pnimi from me'inyan Parsha is the deeper understanding of what this means, that the Haftarah is the same subject or a similar subject as the Parsha, is nit nur as the Inyan HaMeduber in der Haftarah, da was ein Ähnlich zum Inyan HaMeduber in the Parsha. It doesn't only simply mean that the subject that the Haftarah speaks about is a similar subject to what the Parsha speaks about. Nor rather, be'ikir, primarily it means as the Teire v'Haira, was mit darf herausnehmen von der Teire. The lesson that you take out from the Teire, darf sein me'en von der Teire v'Haira, was wird herausgebracht in the Parsha, should be similar to the Teire and the lesson that we take from the Parsha. That's what has to be focused on when we want to see the similarity. So based on this we can say, as yet the Parsha in Teire meloshen Haira and taltach Haira. Every Parsha in Teire, the word Teire means a lesson, has a unique lesson in it. Is the Haftarah, so now the Haftarah of the Parsha every week, which is in Nevi'im, which is in the prophets, one of the things about the Nevi'im is that subjects in Chumash and Torah is then elaborated upon and explained more in Navi. So in the Haftarah, which is from Navi, it's expressing the same lesson and the same point as the Parsha, but with more detail, with more elaboration. So this is the basis for the explanation in our case regarding the Haftarah of Parshas Vaeira. Das was euch die zweite Nevuah is nikva geworden als Chelek von der Haftarah. The fact that also the second prophecy about the reward for Nebuchadnezzar that conquered Sur is part of the Haftarah is weil the Hira from them. It's because the lesson of this point was Nebuchadnezzar hat bekommen Davke Eretz Mitzrayim als Schar verleuchtet sein Sur. The fact that Nebuchadnezzar's reward is that he got Mitzrayim as a reward for conquering the city of Sur is nit kein besondere Hira for sich. It's not a separate. There's not a separate point with a separate lesson. Not a prat und toitzah von der Hira klolos from Mapolis Mitzrayim. It's a detail and it's an outcome of the general lesson here in this Haftarah that speaks about the downfall of Mitzrayim. Was wird erzählt betchilas Haftarah me'ana parsha, which is explained and elaborated upon in the beginning of the Haftarah, which is the same subject as the parsha, the downfall of Mitzrayim. So the continuation about Nebuchadnezzar's reward for conquering Sur is expressing the same point on a spiritual level, the lesson about the downfall of what Mitzrayim represents spiritually. So to explain this, the Rebbe will first go back to the Parshas Vaeira, to have a better understanding what is Mitzrayim all about on a spiritual level, what do they represent, and what was the downfall of Mitzrayim. Parshas Vaeira kommt behemshech zum Siyum from Parshas Shmos. So the Parsha is following the end, the Psukim in the end of Parshas Shmos, wo es wird erzählt wegen der Teine von Yidden zu Moshe und Aaron. But Yidden came and argued and said to Moshe and Aaron, as durch dem, was sie seine gewinn bei Pari Melech Mitzrayim, is der Kosher Shibud geworden nach Ärger wie früher. The fact that they came and spoke to Pari about allowing the Yidden to leave Mitzrayim, so all that happened is the matters became only more difficult. The subjugation and the hard work became worse. And then Moshe Rabbeinu gives over this argument to Hashem when he says, Lo Mari Yisa. One of them is the Rebbeinu Zemfer. And the answer to this comes in the beginning of this week's Parsha, where the Eibusha says, I heard the cry of the Yidden, and Veskas Brisi, I remember my covenant. And therefore, the 5 expressions said here that Hashem will take them out of Mitzrayim and save them and redeem them and take them as a nation and bring them to Eretz Yisrael. Und danach hat sich angegeben die Esse Makis, and then begins the story of the 10 plagues, wie erzählt in Hemshech HaSedra, as the Torah relates in the continuation of the Parsha. Is l'chayre move on. So here, there's a basic question on the answer of Hashem to Moshe Rabbeinu in the beginning of the Parsha. What's the answer to what Moshe Rabbeinu was asking? As Moshe and Aaron haben defiert zu a Matze von Heira Lomazeh, that Moshe and Aaron coming to Mitzrayim only led to matters becoming worse. Der Shemaiti is Nakes b'nei Yisrael goymer, und der Fav Esker is Brisi v'itzeisi goymer, hat gekannt sein frier. This Hashem answers that he heard the cry of Yidden that could have been before. V'adarabba, es hat gedart sein frier. On the contrary, this should be much earlier, before they came to Mitzrayim, or before, that is, Moshe came back to Mitzrayim and Aaron joined him to go speak to Pare. Gleich, wenn es gewähnt, vayishma elekim es nakosam, v'yizkel elekim es brisai. As it says in Parshas Shemais, as soon as Hashem hears the cry of the Yidden and remembers his covenant, then Moshe is noch gewähnt bei Midian. At that point, Moshe Rabbeinu was still in Midian. Und es wollte bechlal nicht gewähnt, tichba da Vaeira. And then, you wouldn't have the outcome of the Yidden having to work even harder after Moshe and Aaron come to Pari. So what is Hashem answering when he says that I heard the cry of Yidden? The phone gufa is muchach. So what we see here from what Hashem is saying at the beginning of the parsha as the shleimus from the eske gomer vaytzeisi gomer, that in order for Hashem to really remember Yidden and fully take them out of Mitzrayim to bring them to Matan Torah, hat sich gekent ausführen erst nachdem wie die Bnei Yisrael sind durchgegangen dem ganzen Koshiyah Shibud. Could only happen after Yidden experienced not just the exile and the shibud and the work, but the very difficult labor. Biz and a from Tichpa Daveda, the very difficult work that they experienced after Moshe and Aaron came back to Mitzrayim. This was enabled that Hashem should remember and take them out of Mitzrayim. And that's Teves's response, that he heard, that he remembers his covenant, and therefore the Koshiyah Shibud will now bring the redemption. What's the reason for this? Why is it necessary to have this step to bring Yidden out of Mitzrayim? From the Biurim, them. So one of the explanations for this is as follows. Golus Mitzrayim is given the Achon of Akdama to Matan Torah. Yidden being exiled in Mitzrayim is as a preparation, an introduction to elevate Yidden and make them ready to receive the Torah by Matan Torah. Now, zwischen den Jahren, was Matan Torah hat aufgetan, one of the things that Matan Torah accomplished is the Reiftu von Mitzvah, Maloshen Tzavse v'chibur. It's Hashem giving Yidden a mitzvah, a command. And the word mitzvah also means that when you fulfill a mitzvah, you become connected and one with Hashem. Kiyam ha-mitzvahs, nor the far was as an erotzen Hashem. Only from Matan Torah do Yidden receive Torah and mitzvahs that now they fulfill a mitzvah purely because it's the will of Hashem. Was durch Eisfolgen der Meibischen Zivui wird der Tzavse v'chibur von dem Adam ha'isa mit kaviyachal HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzvah mitzvahs. And when one follows and fulfills a mitzvah, the command of Hashem, so that itself creates the deepest connection between the person that's fulfilling the mitzvah and so to speak with Hashem that commands the fulfillment of the mitzvah. That's the accomplishment of Matan Torah. And as the Rebbe will elaborate upon soon in the Sikha, that although the Ovis fulfilled Torah mitzvahs before Matan Torah, but it was on a different level. This point of doing the mitzvah because it's Hashem's command and this level of tzafse v'chibur, this level of connection, is the novelty of Matan Torah. Und das ist nicht nur beneged the mitzvahs and suk von chukim. This point of fulfilling mitzvahs in this manner, purely because it's the will of Hashem and for no other reason, is not only in the category of mitzvahs that are chukim, that have no reason, or b'meile is nitoken art, as in dem kiyama mitzvah, soll sich hereimischen sein Verstand oder Regesh, sein eigene Metzies. So therefore, this is a mitzvah where there is no possibility for anything else to be involved in the motivation of the mitzvah. There is no reason, there is no feeling in this. The entity of the person has no reason to get involved in the fulfillment of the mitzvah. Nor, oich mishpatim. This includes also the category of mitzvahs that are mishpatim. What is this category? Even if Hashem would not command them, but it's understood, it's self-understood that this is something that should be fulfilled this way. So even these mitzvahs, the fulfillment of the mitzvah, is not because reason dictates that it's the right thing to act this way, but rather one fulfills the mitzvah because Hashem decreed at Matan Torah to fulfill the mitzvah, purely because it's the will of Hashem. Similar, the Chiddush of Matan Torah relates to the attitude a person has in his learning Torah. So although the content and the logic and the understanding of Torah is muvon, mukif, nitfas, and seichel adam, so this is something that a person very much relates to and appreciates and understands. He encompasses and totally grasps in his intellect what he's learning. But this is not a subject of just human intellect, God forbid. This is Torah's Hashem. It's Hashem's Torah. Chachmasi is barach versus hecher from Geder and Ephraim. It's Hashem's wisdom, which is totally beyond any kind of existence in creation. Nor nasa v'yard lamata. This wisdom of Hashem has journeyed and came down and descended below into this world. To the point that even human intellect could comprehend the ideas of Torah. Therefore, it's a must before one learns Torah to first make the blessing, the birchas HaTorah, and then you can learn. They're bittul zum Neisen at Torah, because the bracha is when one is expressing the fact that the Torah he's learning is Hashem's Torah, and therefore he's dedicated to the giver of the Torah. Weil dafke durch den bittul can the seichel anivra haben a emes tfisa in Torah v'zis chachmasa shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's only then, when you have this level of nullification and dedication to Hashem, can the human intellect have a real grasp of what Torah really is, the Torah being the wisdom of Hashem. And therefore, coming back to the point of how Golus Mitzrayim is a preparation for this new revelation and this new connection to Hashem through Torah mitzvahs. Kidei as Yidden sollen sein gereit zu Kabbalas HaTorah, in order that Yidden should be ready to receive the Torah on this level, to sein Kelim, of zu nehmen Torah mitzvahs, to be a vessel, in quotations, in order to take in Torah mitzvahs on this level. Haben sie gemusst früher durchgehen die Yisurim von Golus Mitzrayim. They first had to experience the suffering of the exile in Mitzrayim, bizech koishi shibud, including the very difficult slavery and labor that they experienced. Was die Yisurim haben bei Yidden gepoilt den Bittel von Zeir Metzias. That experience of Golus Mitzrayim had the effect on Yidden that it nullified them as an entity, that their approach now to accepting Torah will not be based on who they are, but rather it will come to it from a place of total dedication and nullification to Hashem. As we can clearly see, as when one is experiencing pain and suffering, Hashem should save us from this. So this breaks the person. He loses any sense of arrogance or feeling himself as important, and basing his connection to Hashem then also on who he is. On their bittul, when Yidden came to this level of bittul, where their entity was crushed and broken, is given the keli to Matan Torah. This made an opening in them that now they're ready to receive a Torah, the Torah that is, and mitzvahs in its pure sense. To be able to fulfill Torah and mitzvahs, not for any reason, not for any other motivation, but purely because this is what Hashem wants, and purely for the Torah being the Chachma of Hashem. That's the point of Golus Mitzrayim as a preparation for Matan Torah as it relates to Yidden. And this is the answer that Hashem is giving Moshe Rabbeinu when it's the Koshia Shibud Tichba da Vaeira, that now that we're preparing to take Yidden out of Mitzrayim, so they have to go through this step in order to be able to prepare fully for receiving the Torah. Now this point is regarding Yidden, but this also relates to Matan Torah that brings Hashem into the world in general. Kishein v'yesad gemuz zayin al tzachana to Matan Torah, the bittul by Yidden, just as it was necessary to have this preparation for Matan Torah in order to bring by the Yidden the pure dedication to Hashem, azoi hat sich das euch gedarft auftan in Welt. The same had to be accomplished also regarding the world in general. Und das ist der Ingen von die Makkis Mitzrayim und Mapolas Paroi Melech Mitzrayim und der Moshel Bekippe von der ganzen Welt. And that's the theme of this week's parsha, where it speaks about the plagues and the downfall of Parai, which was the king of Mitzrayim and the leader of Mitzrayim, which was the superpower, that he ruled over the entire world. So here the downfall of Parai is the preparation for the world becoming a place that will receive the revelation of Matan Torah and the truth of Hashem in the world. So what was the clip of Parai that had to be broken? What does the Parai represent? Klippas Parai is Teikif Hayeshes. Parai represents the greatest level of arrogance. Vaeira gesagt, as Parai himself says, Mi Hashem Hasheshma B'Koile. Who is the Hashem that I have to listen to him? Und wie es wird noch mehr ausgeteilt in der Haftarah, and as it's spelled out even better and more in the Haftarah, that what did Parai say? Parai Melech Mitzrayim Gei Masha Omar. Parai Melech Mitzrayim says, Li Yairi, the Nile River is mine. I don't rely on anybody else. I have the Yairi and Vaniya Sisini, and I created for myself all of this wealth and this entire kingdom of Mitzrayim. Parai Melech Mitzrayim is their menaget Matan Torah. So in that sense, Parai is the greatest opposition to Hashem giving the Torah, was es verbunden dafke mit Bittel, Metzias Adam Kanal. The idea of Hashem giving the Torah is the full revelation of the purity of Hashem, where that demands a pure dedication, and the world in general to be completely nullified in the presence of Hashem. So Parai is the exact opposite and the complete opposition to this revelation of Matan Torah. So now, following and through the fact that the exile and the subjugation of Yidden Mitzrayim, accomplished by them, that they came to a level of self-nullification, is gekommen, then what followed after this is, es hat gebracht die Mapole u'Shvire von Teikef HaYeshus vom Welt. This also brought the downfall and the crushing of the arrogance that existed in the world. Their bittul from Klippus Parei, to break the Klippa of Parei himself, Memshalte and his rulership, Moshe Bekippa, ruling on the entire world, und sein Yeshus, and his arrogance, durch the Makis, through the plagues. Wie dezählt B'siyam HaSedre, as it says in the conclusion of this week's parasha, as Parei had made given, that Parei himself admitted, Hashem HaTzadik, Hashem is righteous, V'ani v'ami Yarishayim, and me and my people are wicked. So this is the theme of this week's parasha, breaking the Klippa of Parei in order to allow for the pure revelation of Matan Torah. What's the revelation of Matan Torah? The fulfillment of a mitzvah, the revelation of Hashem, where you do a mitzvah purely because it's His will, and learning the Torah purely for the Chachma of Hashem. So the point is to remove the Klippa of Parei, which is the takeif of arrogance, to allow the pureness of Hashem to come into the world, and now we're able to accept this and bring the mitzvahs of Hashem in the world. So this is the theme of this week's parsha, on a deeper level, understanding what Parei Beruchnius represents and what the breaking of Parei and Golus Mitzrayim is as a preparation to Matan Torah. Now, based on this, we come back to understand now the deeper connection that there is between the Haftarah and the parsha. There, in this point there, as Klippas Parei Melech Mitzrayim is der Menagitz of Matan Torah, that Parei, the king of Mitzrayim, he is the ultimate opposition, the block for Hashem giving the Torah in the world. This is clearly and even better expressed in the story in the Haftarah. Kanalan is explained before, as the Haftarah is mer mefarat and mevayer the Vaeira from the Sedra. The point of the Haftarah is not only being the same theme of the parsha, but it's also the same theme in the Vaeira and the Torah and the Ruchni is the sense, and it elaborates, it explains even more what's in the parsha. So what does it say in the Haftarah? If Mapolis Mitzrayim is in the Haftarah Mavuah Tzvei Taimim u'Besmichas u'Behemshach Zelazeh. When it speaks about the downfall of Mitzrayim in that time period of history, it speaks about two reasons for the downfall, and it brings them both together. Frier state, first it says, as the Mapala vet kumin, Yan heyesa mishenes kanal beis Yisrael. The reason why they deserve this downfall is because of the fact that they were there as the Yidden relied on them, but they turned out to be just like a reed that falls that you can't rely upon. Meaning they promised Yidden that they'll come to their aid in different situations in that time in history, and they didn't. They didn't keep their word. The Fahr was beis Yisrael hat sich verlassen auf die zugesagte Hilfe von den Mitzrayim. The Yidden relied then on the promised help and aid of the Mitzrayim, und sie haben nicht gehalten dem Zusag. They didn't keep their promise. That's one reason that the Haftarah says first. Und gleich danach, but immediately afterwards, the pasuk says, is the pasuk mamshich, L'chein kayama goyme hineni mevi alecha cherev goyme. That Hashem now says that I'll bring upon you a sword on his Messiah Yan Oma Yair Liv Ani Asisi. That the reason why Mitzrayim deserves this downfall is because Parei said that the Nile River is mine and I created this all for myself. As the Churban of Polis Mitzrayim is Tzali Parei Zagin Yair Liv Ani Asisi. That his downfall comes for this, that the fact that his arrogance, that he did not recognize Hashem's existence at all and says, I created this all for myself. Now, these two reasons about the downfall of Mitzrayim are two completely separate points. Und doch bintzei the Navi in ein smichas v'hemshach kanal. But nevertheless, in the Nevuah here of Yecheskel, he ties these 2 points together. Is the Fun verstandig, so we understand from this, as the zwei avlas from Mitzrayim, these two sins of Mitzrayim, that is the cause of their downfall, is eine atitza von zweite. One is an outcome of the other, kedel kaman, as will be explained here. And this takes us back to understanding what's the essence of Klippe of Mitzrayim, that's the opposition to Matan Torah. So the point of Matan Torah is the real full revelation of Hashem, that the man's full bittul and fulfilling a mitzvah purely because it's Ratzon Hashem. So Mitzrayim is the ultimate opposition to this revelation. So now going back to the point that we explained before, that the fulfillment of a mitzvah only because of Ratzon Hashem applies to all categories of mitzvahs, including the mitzvah of Mishpatim, which is the mitzvahs that have reason and are self-understood that you would fulfill them. But regarding this though, here's the point that ties together the two points of why Mitzrayim will deserve their downfall. And the Rebbe explains as follows: it It was already explained a number of times. Wegen dem, als euch mishpatim, darf man mekayim sein, weil so hat der Rebischter Geise gewinnt. That mishpatim, the mitzvah, the category of mishpatim, it has to be fulfilled because this is what Hashem decreed. Meaning that, going back to the point that was mentioned before already, that although we're speaking about those mitzvahs that have reason, but nevertheless, they have to be fulfilled, not because Seichel dictates that it makes sense that they're right, but it should be fulfilled because this is what Hashem decreed. Ukumirum is bezeh, this is also hinted in the fact, was the Aseres HaDibris, zenen kailo eich azelche tzivuyim pshutim v'lesirtzach v'gaimer. And the Aseres HaDibris, that begins with Anechi Hashem Elekecha, but then it goes on to bring very simple commands. Thou shalt not murder, and so on. So why is all these simple points being brought in the Aseres HaDibris? Weil euch der Kiyum von die Tzivuyim pshutim darf sein mitzad dem was Anechi Havai Elekecha. Their fulfillment has to be purely because of Anechi Havai Elekecha, because it's Hashem's command and Hashem's decree, not because of any other reason that you understand it's right. So this is what Matan Torah represents. This is the revelation of Matan Torah, the purity of a mitzvah in all categories of mitzvahs, and it affects even when how you fulfill a mitzvah that has a reason to it, but that's not the basis of the mitzvah. It's the purity of Hashem that you're doing it for. So this is reflected also here regarding Mitzrayim, which is the ultimate opposition to Matan Torah. Das was Mitzrayim is geworden am Mishenes Kana LaBeis Yisrael, Heipech Avtachasam. Sorry, the fact that Mitzrayim, it was like something like a reed that you could not rely on them. They just fell away and they were not there for Yidden, even though they promised they would be. So this is something where, in a very simple level, just menschlichkeit, a promise to fulfill a promise that, even on that level, on that basic level, they were not there to fulfill their promise, is the sibud of given. What's the cause for this? You may think of that the cause for this is that there was some flaw in the character of the Mitzrayim, that they didn't have that character to be a mensch, to follow up on their promise. But that's not the real cause for this. The real cause is given zayin yeshes. It's their arrogance. Zayin zagen yo'er liya v'ani asisi. The fact that Paroi and Mitzrayim says that I'm independent and I created myself and I have the Nile River for myself. That's the real reason that brings them not to be there, even on a simple level of menschlichkeit, for Yidden to fulfill their promise. In other words, this is the exact opposite point of what the inyan of being Mekayim the Mishpatim, because Hashem decrees this, expresses. The point of Matan Torah is that if you try to separate the two, to be Mekayim Mishpatim just because of the reason that they have, and you separate it from Anochi Hashem Lekecha, you'll end up not fulfilling this. You can't just rely on the good character traits of a human being and to create a value system for yourself that will uphold these standards. It doesn't work that way. As we see here with Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim was a very successful and upstanding nation, but nevertheless with a tremendous level of arrogance that did not recognize Hashem's existence at all. And therefore, even on a simple level of menschlichkeit, to be there for the promise that they told Yidden that they'll come to their aid, they did not follow through. So here we see why, in this sense as well, Mitzrayim is the ultimate opposition to this aspect of Matan Torah as well, that you fulfill all mitzvahs and even mishpatim. It's impossible to stick to the dedication of fulfilling even these kinds of mitzvahs unless you connect it to Anechi Hashem Lekecha at Matan Torah. That's what you see here in the Haftarah of this week's parsha when it ties together the 2 points about why Mitzrayim deserves to be conquered and to see their downfall. In the Haftarah is Meinyan HaParsha. Now this point as well is coming to express the point that it says in the parsha. And it's actually expressing even more, it's elaborating and expressing more of this point that we see in the parsha. How do we see this point of the parsha, the connection of these 2 points here, regarding to what extent Paroi is the opposition to Matan Torah, not only in not recognizing Hashem, but also as that relates even to the category of mitzvahs of Mishpatim. So if you take a look at what it says about why Hashem brought the 10 Makkos on the Mitzrayim, gefindt men in Torah 2 times. So it says in the Torah 2 reasons. Aleph, Kanal, 1 as mentioned before, it's a poil zand in the Yoda Mitzrayim Keni Havaya. That the Mitzrayim should come and recognize the Ani Havaya. Beis, wie steht in Parshas Lech, the Gamas Hagoy She'avedu Don Anochi. that Hashem promises that He's going to punish the nation that subjugated the Yidden. And it's a punishment for this, that they enslaved Yidden. So this seems to be two separate points. So here the Haftarah clarifies for us when it speaks about the downfall of Mitzrayim, and it ties together the two reasons of this, that they weren't there to help Yidden as they promised, and this that Pari said that he sees himself as independent. Just like when the Haftarah ties it together, we understand that here in the Parsha, the 2 points about the Makis also are one and the same thing. Das was Mitzrayim, das was Pari hat makrisch gewend, die Metzies von Eibishten. The fact that Pari denied the existence of Hashem, wie hat geteinet lo yadaiti es Havaya. I don't know Havaya. He doesn't know Hashem. Is gewend die Sibbe, this itself is the cause, was hat interfered zum Meshabet sein und peinigen die Yidden bei von Achigerua. That led to the fact that he subjugated Yidden and brought them suffering in the worst sense. Was hat nicht kein Art of Philimitzateva Anushias. Even on a simple, basic human level, this is something that was terrible. So you may think that the fact that they were on this level of humanity, they were lacking basic humanity, that has nothing to do with the fact that they had tremendous arrogance and they didn't recognize Hashem's existence or Hashem's greatness. It's two separate points. But as we see in the Haftarah, these two things come together. It's impossible to separate Lo Sirtzach from Anochi Hashem Elokecha. That's what Matan Torah represents. And Pare, which is the ultimate opposition to Matan Torah, we see how because he didn't Lo Yadaiti Savaya and he had that tremendous level of arrogance, therefore, as a result, you lose your even basic level of menschlichkeit. He's ready to treat Yidden in such a gruesome way that even a basic level of humanity is lost. That's the point that we see here in the Haftarah that's me'end the Parsha and comes and actually clarifies to us a deeper understanding of what the clip of Parei in Mitzrayim is all about as an opposition to Matan Torah. Now, based on this, we can go on to understand the other point in the Haftarah, which is that we continue in the Haftarah to speak about Nebuchadnezzar, Melech Bavel, that because he conquered Sur, he gets the reward that Hashem says he's going to be the one to conquer Mitzrayim. So to explain the connection to that point, the Rebbe takes what we spoke about till here and points out another detail that comes out of this. Oster inyan. So this point that we spoke about, the Chiddush of Matan Torah, and how Golus Mitzrayim was a preparation for this, and how to break the clip of Pare, the ultimate opposition to Matan Torah, is all a preparation. As mitzvahs darf man bekayem sein, was es einen Zivuyim von Eibishten. What was the Chiddush of Matan Torah? That you fulfill the mitzvahs simply because they are the command of Hashem, not for any other motivation or reason. Bringt zu noch hamaskana. This brings another conclusion as a ma'aseh hu'eker. Another main thing that comes out of the Chiddush of Matan Torah, when it comes to mitzvahs, the main focus is in the action. Action is the main thing. And that's something that's uniquely a Chiddush of Matan Torah. And here the Rebbe explains better what's the Chiddush of Matan Torah in contrast to the Torah mitzvahs that the Avos fulfilled before. The Kiyam mitzvahs shel Avos far Matan Torah. The mitzvahs that the Avos fulfilled before Matan Torah is in Yonai and Aveda b'koyach hanevraim. What's the point and the level of this mitzvahs that they fulfilled then? It's them serving Hashem to the utmost level possible in creation. Vad l'sharsham, to the highest level of the source of where they are created from. Sheiresh hanevraim, the source of their creation, the highest godly levels. Elokus, this is melubish b'briya b'seider ishtalshalos, a level of godliness that then comes down to be invested in the world and in the system of creation. Now, over here, when that's the case, kol olam b'fnei yatzmai, every level, every world has its limitation and its definition. And as a result, the essence of a spiritual world and physical are each separate. They exist and are defined in a completely different level of existence, and therefore in Nivrayim, these two cannot be merged and joined together. The mitzvah. So now when you look at mitzvahs, so there's two aspects to the mitzvah. So first, if you take a look at every mitzvah, that at its essence, it's godly, it's spiritual. Was bringt And therefore it has a unique content that brings a purification and an elevation on a spiritual level, Shabba'ilam, both in the existence of the world and also B'seichel, V'regesh Adam, and in the intellect and in the feelings of a person. That's one aspect of the mitzvah. The ruchnius, the spiritual elevation that there is in the fulfillment of a mitzvah. This was the main point of the fulfillment of mitzvahs by the Avis. Beruchnius nefesh adam. The effect of the mitzvah in the spiritual well-being of the person. Ba'ilam, and also in the world. Va'at tzuzayna merkava udatzilis, to the point that the Avis became so elevated that they were completely nullified and dedicated to Hashem, like a chariot that has a rider that it takes to the destination where the rider takes it to. Udatzilis, and a merkava of the world of Atzilis. Olam shekule ruchnius, a world that's complete and pure spirituality, and the oneness of Hashem is completely revealed there. That's the focus of the mitzvahs by the Yavis before Matan Torah. Und das, was mir gefällt, euch fahr Matan Torah by the Yavis asiyas mitzvahs, the fact that we find that there were mitzvahs that the Yavis fulfilled before Matan Torah, even in action, physically, is the asiyah given a tofel and an oisdruk from the minyan ruchni. The focus here is not on the action in itself. The action is secondary. It's really just an expression of their deep dedication that spills out and spills over into the action itself as to express their inner dedication to Hashem. That's their focus in Vaeira. Was the Fahr is damals die Maisa mitzvahs begashmius nicht given as a bediktuk. Bediuk, that is, in alle pratim wie die kiyama mitzvahs nach Matan Torah. And the proof of this is that if the focus is the action, so then the action itself, every detail matters, because that's where it's at. But by the Yavis, as we see, the details and every minute detail did not matter in their fulfillment of the mitzvahs before Matan Torah, because the action was just an expression of something else, which was the main focus. And so in that case, when the action, like when a person has a very deep feeling for something, and that's the main thing, so the action which is secondary is not necessarily going to be very specific, but it's just expressing a feeling. That was the Vaeira of the Avis before Matan Torah. By contrast, when it comes to Matan Torah, so here the chiddush of Matan Torah is, it's a completely new level and a different approach to mitzvahs. Is a kiyama mitzvahs b'koyach habayra. The fulfillment of mitzvahs now here is not an expression of the ultimate level of a human beings serving Hashem, but it's b'koyach habayra. It's the power of the Creator of Hashem that descends and comes down into the world. And therefore, shalamayla mechilek ruchnius v'gashmius. The Eibishter is above any of these levels of distinctions of any worlds, of the entire system of creation, including ruchnius and gashmius, which seem to be so distant from each other, but by Hashem it's all one and the same thing. There's no difference. And now it's the power of Hashem that was revealed and came down and gives us Torah. So now a Yid fulfills Torah with this koyach, with this attitude. Now, going back to the point mentioned before, a Yid fulfills Torah not because it's him dedicating and elevating himself with what he has to Hashem, but it's Hashem's mitzvah that is given to you, that you fulfill simply because it's the ratzon of Hashem. It's purely all about the Eibishter that the mitzvah is expressing, and therefore in that sense, by the Eibishter, Ruchnius and Gashmius, there's no distinction. All these things don't have any significance. Hashem is the only existence, and therefore Ruchnis and Gashmis are all one the same thing. Ubemela is the ikir in them, so therefore here, when the mitzvah is fulfilled because of the command of Hashem and the will of Hashem, so here what's the main thing of the mitzvah? Nitazoi kavanas mitzvahs, not so much the point of the spiritual aspect of the mitzvah, what a person is thinking in his mind and his heart when he fulfills the mitzvah. On that level of the mitzvah, there are many levels, and everybody fulfills the mitzvah according to his measure, on his level. Not asiyas ha-mitzvahs b'poil. Here the main focus is the physical action of the mitzvah. Here you're not expressing your feeling of the mitzvah or your level of dedication, but rather Hashem's command and His will that's fulfilled by the action of the mitzvah. That's the actual fulfillment of His will. That's why the focus is on the Maisa. Furthermore, as mentioned before, if it's the koyach habayre, if it's Hashem, so then ruchnius and gashmius abishava, they're all one and the same thing. But actually, no, in the action of the mitzvah, here specifically, this expresses that it's the pure will of Hashem. The rotzen atzmi in mitzvahs is on helem ulevush in dvarim gashmiyim b'maisa, b'mitzvahs maisias. The fact that the mitzvah is the pure essential will of Hashem, and there's nothing else that it's about, there's no additional reason or any other thing that it's dressed up with, but as it comes out into the world, that's specifically expressed when you fulfill a mitzvah physically, in the action of the mitzvah. Why? Because because in the physical, what's expressed here is the fact that the physical is not in any way expressing who Hashem is and what the content of the mitzvah is about. So what is it? As far as the action of the mitzvah is concerned, there's no content in this that expresses any depth or spirituality. So what is it? It's just purely the will of Hashem. That's what you have expressed in the physical aspect of the mitzvah. Mashenkin dvarim ruchni, and by contrast, in the spiritual aspect of the mitzvah, but then in begeder levush, bepchinas keli, here, the attitude of the mitzvah is the fact that there's something being expressed here. There's some content and depth of godliness that's being expressed in this. Kennen Sie nicht stehen der Ratzen Atzmi, the Lamaila begoli, was is Hechel von Kelim begeder an Evroim. So here on this level of the mitzvah, the essence of the mitzvah, the will of Hashem of the mitzvah, cannot be fully expressed in this. So therefore, after Matan Torah, the main chiddush of mitzvahs is expressed specifically in the action of the mitzvah. So now based on this, we can understand the continuation of Daf Torah. Why? The part about Nebuchadnezzar and the fact that he conquered the city of Tzor and got a reward for this is a continuation of the point of the parsha, and then the Haftarah, which is Me'ena parsha, that speaks about what the essence of Klippas Paray is as an opposition to the Chiddush of Matan Torah. Apizeh wird werden verstandig die Scheiches beteuchen von der Nevuah wegen Nebuchadnezzar Schar mit der ersten Nevuah in der Haftarah wegen Mapolis Mitzrayim. Now we can see the connection between in a connection here in the content of the prophecy about Nebuchadnezzar's reward in conquering Mitzrayim as a reward for conquering Tzor, how this is connected to the point about the downfall of Mitzrayim in the first part of the Haftarah. So now, let's take a deeper look at what exactly Nebuchadnezzar did and why he's getting rewarded. In der Nevuah was red wegen der Tashlum Schatz und Nebuchadnezzar verleuchtet sein Tzor, when it speaks about the reward that Nebuchadnezzar gets for conquering Tzor, is l'chayre nicht verstandig. There's a simple question here. Beim Einnehmen Tzor is Nebuchadnezzar nicht gewähnt äußern zu Mekayim sein der neubischen Ratzen, as Tzor soll nukad werden. When he conquers the city of Tzor, he wasn't doing it in order to fulfill Hashem's wish that the city Tzor should be conquered. Not hat das getan zu lieb sich. He was doing it for a selfish reason, for himself. Hat bechlal gewollt einnehmen die ganze Welt. He was on his way to conquering the entire world. Werden am Moshel Bekippah, to be the superpower to rule over the whole world. Und befragt bei Koibisch sein Tzor, and specifically when he came to conquer the city Tzor, was gefindt sich alaf b'choif yam. It's a port city, therefore very important, very significant strategically to be able to rule over the whole world. Und Yeshleimar beis another point. Auf dem Weg was führt ke Mitzrayim. This is on his way that it leads to Mitzrayim. Alternatively, was is given as sakone for sein gainly lachen with Mitzrayim, was hat gewollt einnehmen. It's on his way that it's stopping him of being able to fight and conquer Mitzrayim. That was his motivation. So the question is, was kommt ihm der Fascha? So why does he deserve any reward for what he did if the action that he did happens to be what Hashem wanted? But his motivation is totally selfish. Is the posik medayik? So the answer to this is, and this is what's being highlighted here in the Haftarah by including this part of the story. This is the posik says, that it's the action that he did, which means as follows: here we're not paying attention to his thoughts and his motivation. What he did in actuality. Und bald as der Ratz Hashem hat sich bepoil ausgeführt durch ihm, and since the will of Hashem was actually fulfilled through him, even if he would not do it, wollte Ratz Hashem as so soll milket werden saivi ausgeführt geworden durch an anderen. It would anyways happen through somebody else, but the fact is he's the one that did it. Kommt in the Farschar. He deserves reward for this. That's what's expressed here in this story, in this part of the story of the Haftarah. So what do we see over here? That the importance of the action, of the Maisa B'Poil. And that's the whole entire story of the Parsha and of the Haftarah that expresses the Klippa of Paray and Mitzrayim that are the opposition to Matan Torah. Matan Torah expresses the point that you fulfill a mitzvah purely because it's Ratzon Hashem. And there the main focus is, as explained before, is the Maisa. And so therefore this point is expressed over here in the next part of the Haftarah when it speaks about the schar of Nebuchadnezzar, that just the Maisa that he did brings him this schar, even if his machshava and kavana is not there, because the main thing that matters is the action. Just like it is in Kedusha, so too over here, also in Le'umazeh, you can find such a kind of thing, that the action is the main thing that matters. So from this point, we can also take a lesson in serving Hashem. When you have a favor that someone else did you, so don't think to yourself, don't make the following calculation. The other person is not having me in mind. He has some kind of ulterior motive, he has himself in mind. Or you may think as Yener is betevach, and the other person is naturally generous. So he doesn't deserve a special thanks for this favor that he did. He's just acting upon his nature, which is something that he's sort of forced by. So therefore, he deserves no appreciation at all. Learn to Haftarah, so the Haftarah comes and teaches us. As a filler in Nebuchadnezzar, even an individual, a Rasha like Nebuchadnezzar, here, this is not something that you may think, but this is definitely the case. He had himself in mind. Hat ihm der Eibishter gegeben schar, der Fahr, was es gewähnt, Pa'ulasa yashavat ba. The Eibishter rewards him for the action that he did. The fact is that he did this action that Hashem wanted, so the same is in the case when another Yid did the action, a favor for you. Definitely when a Yid is the one that's doing the favor for you. Because here it's reasonable to assume and say that even more, it's not only the action, he also did it with heart, meaning having you in mind, because that's the nature of a Yid, that he has the teva of being a Gemel Chesed and a Rachman, and therefore he did it, the action itself, and therefore you should appreciate just the action and also realize that he is thinking about you, because that's the teva of a Yid. This gives an additional reason and explanation, and this is from a different angle to give us a more simple and basic logical explanation of the word from Baal Shem Tov, as man darf lieb haben jeden a viele dem was gefindt sich bekatzve tevel und hat ein Kemel gesehen. So the Baal Shem Tov says that you should love every single Jew, no matter where in the world he is, in the world he is, on the other side of the world, even though you never met him. So this is besides the obvious point that we know of what it says in Chassidus, and especially in Tanya Perek Lamed Beis, about the deep connection between one Yid and another. That's the reason for loving every Yid in the entire world. But here we have an additional reason based on what we learned. Every single Jew, regardless of the condition that he finds himself in, has done many good deeds. As the Gemara says about every single Jew, that Malay and mitzvahs kerimah, that even they are filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. Every good action, and even a good thought, of the ganze Welt, is not only a personal thing, but it has an impact on the entire world. Rambam, and as the Rambam says, that you tip the scale of yourself and the entire world all in the favor that and you bring a salvation for the entire world. So now it comes out as jeder Yid is mekabel tshuva atzala from kol echad v'echad miYisrael. That every single Yid in the world could say that I am receiving a favor and a salvation from every other Yid that exists in the entire world, that's contributing by his good deeds to bringing the world to this place of tshuva v'atzala. So therefore, every single Yid in the world, you owe him a thanks and an appreciation for what he did for you. Und nach Pi, als jene hat dabei nicht getragen wegen der Teve, was that rauskommen von dem for a zweiten. The other person doesn't know me, never met me, is not having me in mind, is not thinking about the favor that I get from this. Allah, es kam wir kam a zweiten, was gefindt sich bei Katzwe Teves, was came nicht gesehen. Definitely not, he's not having in mind someone that lives on the other side of the world that he never met. Von deswegen, but nevertheless, as we learn from Daf Teire, wie bald as mod bepoil, mekabel gewend, von der zweiten Teve. Since the fact is that you did receive a favor by someone else for whatever good deed he did that contributes to the good of the entire world, but you have the action that he did, so you have to be appreciative of this. This to the point to have a feeling of love to every single Jew in every part of the world, and that you love another Yid like you love yourself. So this is the conclusion of the Sikha explaining the Haftarah and the Parsha this week, the connection of the two. And as we see here in the end of the Sikha, the Rebbe very much focuses on the lashon that it says regarding Nebuchadnezzar, the action. The action is the main thing that counts, and therefore he got rewarded for this. So now we continue to the next part of the Sikha, which is the Sikha on Chav Dalet Teves, the connection of this point to the Alter Rebbe and the Yom Yelula, the yahrzeit of the Alter Rebbe on Chav Dalet Teves. Al Pi Amaleel Siv Ches Tes, based on what we explained before in Sifim Ches and Tes and the Mdiik Fum Pulasai Ashavad Ba, in the exact word of Pulasai, that it's the action that counts, as the Ratzon Atzmi and Mitzvahs, that the deepest expression of the will of Hashem in fulfillment of mitzvahs is verbunden nit azay mit kavanas mitzvahs. That's not expressed so much in the spiritual experience of the mitzvah, no mit maisa mitzvahs. It's the action of the mitzvah. Based on this, we could also say a remez in a minyan ha'ilula von alten Rebbe Chav Dalet Teves, that this is also a hint to the hilula, the yahrzeit of the Alter Rebbe on Chav Dalet Teves, was it's chal b'rei v'shanim in the vach from Parshas Vaeira. Most years it falls out in the week of Parshas Vaeira, from the Haftarah, and we see here a connection to the yahrzeit of the Alter Rebbe in the Haftarah. So now let's take a look in the Igris Kodesh, in the Igeres HaKodesh in Tanya. Zwischen die Igris Kodesh was reingestellt geworden al Yedei Rabbanim Sheyichyeh B'nei Hagoyin HaMechabel Zal Nishmas Meiden. So the sons of the Alter Rebbe that included in Tanya letters of the Alter Rebbe. So amongst those letters is in Sefer Tanya is Da an Igeres Tanchumim. There's a letter where the Alter Rebbe is consoling after the passing of his Rebbe, Rav Mendel Haradoker, Mitabir of der Igeres. And there's also an explanation on the letter. Was der Alter Rebbe hat geschrieben nach der Ptire von Rav Mendel Haradoker, was is gewähnt, nicht nur a Tzaddik, nor a Nossi. He was not only a great Tzaddik in his times, but he was also a Nossi, a Rebbe. So now, in der Igeres of Biyuda, in this letter, and it's in its explanation, Retzich, what's explained there is, as oich la'achre ptiras hatzadik, vet nimshach zu talmidav chulu ha'are von maisav v'toirasov v'avidas ha'sha'avet kol yimei chayav. That even after the passing of a tzaddik, so to his students, there still is a ray of his work and his Torah in this world that he worked in his lifetime. Gefindt man in them a dvar pelle. So there's a wondrous point here. As in dem Igeres, benutzt sich der Alter Rebbe mit dem Loschen von heutige auf Teire, Shavak Chaye Ruchai, Pu'ulasai Shavet Ba. So the Alter Rebbe uses the expression of the pasuk of this Haftarah this week, that he leaves his spirit for his students, using the words Pu'ulasai Shavet Ba, the action that he did in this world. That's where he quotes from. So that first the Rebbe says, you may think that the fact that he chooses an expression of a pasuk is not something to pay extra attention to. This is a style of writing. B'chlal, generally, as men leint b'shitchi is the Igeres, if you just superficially read this letter, ubefrat koidem kriyas abir, especially before you read the explanation on this letter, you may think as the Alter Rebbe hat sich da benutzt mit Lashonis from Psukim, the Alter Rebbe makes use of expressions in Psukim, Lashon neufel al Lashon v'chulu, one expression that leads into another expression of a pasuk, liyofi amalitza, just for the beautiful writing and expression of the subject. This is geven rogel, befrat b'yamim mehem, as it was customary, and especially in those times. Al derech v'mefarshi at Tanach zagim and again l'ribik suvim b'Tanach. Similar to what commentaries on Tanakh say regarding many psukim in Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, that certain things that may seem as redundancies or a certain style of writing is just a matter of a beautiful way of expressing a point. However, when you learn and you take a look at the explanation of this letter, was the Alter Rebbe ba'atzmat geschrieben, the Alter Rebbe himself wrote this, Zetmen v'yed the lashon is meduyik and hotten sich a ganzen inyan. You begin to see how every expression is precise and it expresses an entire subject. So getting back to the fact that the Alter Rebbe chooses the pasuk Pu'ulasei yeshavet ba, is tamua kanal. So here there's a great wonder. Favas nutzt Alter Rebbe dafke dem lashon. Why? When he speaks about the work in the lifetime of a tzaddik, does he use this expression? V'shteit gar by Nebuchadrezzar Malach Bavel. That's written in the Navi here regarding whom? Nebuchadrezzar, the king of Bavel. To me, and them is noch starker, the wonder about this choice of this pasuk is even greater. In dem Biur, when you look at the explanation on this letter, where the Alter Rebbe explains and goes over the same point, there it does not mention this expression and this pasuk of Pulasai. On the contrary, dort is a madgish as mizmekabel von tzaddik. There, what the Alter Rebbe highlights is, what do you receive from a tzaddik after his passing? This is al yedei diburav u'machshavaisav. In the lifetime of the tzaddik, all of the divrei Torah that he said and his thoughts that he had in this world, that's what the Talmidim received from him. Nit pulasai, maisa. The Alter Rebbe does not at all mention, not only not mention this pasuk, but he doesn't mention at all about the action of his lifetime. So what's the reason for this? That the Alter Rebbe brings pulasai. But based on what we explained earlier about the significance of focusing on the action, as pulasai geimer is merames oifen ilu von maise in tzaddik kedusha, that pulasai here being included in the Haftarah hints to us the greatness of action, not only as it is by Nebuchadrezzar, but also as it is in holiness. This is the reason why the Alter Rebbe here in the letter quotes specifically this expression, because this is a main point regarding the work of a tzaddik in this world. Kedel Kamanas will be explained there. So now to explain this, let's first introduce another point here. A fundamental difference that we can see between what Alter Rebbe is speaking about in the letter, when he's consoling after Rab Mendel Haradaka passed away, and then in the explanation on the letter. In der Igeres is the Iker Adgosha of der Oiftu von Tzaddik. The main point Alter Rebbe is highlighting and speaking about in the letter is the great accomplishment of the Tzaddik himself, as Shavak Chaim Lechol Chai, that even after he passes away, because of the greatness of who he is, he leaves life, he leaves spiritual life for all those that are still alive in the world. And as Mamshech Chaim Oich La'achrei Aptire, he brings down life even after his passing, B'Avedas Hashem, in serving Hashem, B'chol Echad Ve'echad Kifi B'chines Es Kashrusai, for everybody, based on the level of his connection and his bond to this tzaddik. Furthermore, he brings also a revelation even regarding mundane matters, the tzaddikaya magin and alalma, because the tzaddik are the ones that protect everything, a person for all matters that he has in the world. That's the point in the Igeres, focusing on the greatness of the tzaddik. In other words, how far the extent of his influence is, even after he passes away, and even regarding the physical well-being. And then Biur, however, in the explanation of the letter, is the Ikad Gasha of Kabbalah's Talmidov. Here the main thing that's being highlighted is the students, how the students receive this revelation of the Tzaddik. Even after their Rebbe passed away, they continue to receive from the work of the Tzaddik when he's in this world. And on the contrary, Nitnar Aziv, and this time they can receive from the tzaddik not only a ray of the influence, nor mibchinas ruach rabam ha'atzmius. They can receive from the essential spirit of their Rebbe after his passing. That's the focus in the explanation. Based on this, we can explain, possibly, the difference pointed out before between the letter and the beard, that in the letter the Alter Rebbe quotes the pasuk Pu'ulasai, he's focusing on the action, and in the beard the Alter Rebbe omits this, and he focuses on the Burei Machshavaisav, the words and the thoughts of the tzaddik in his lifetime. Pu'ule weist when we speak about action, and specifically this word pu'ula, what this indicates is, as the koyach hapoyel was in der pu'ula, that the energy, the power of the one that is doing this is schon geworden nifrat von dem adam hapoyel. It's an action that's done and gets separated from the one that does this. We can say shezeu nifrat od yosem mimaisa. In the expression of the word pu'ula, it expresses this point of an action that's done and separated from the one that does it, even more than the expression of maisa. Maisa expresses a certain character of the person that's doing this. There's the machshavah and dibra and maisa, the three garments of the soul, where a person expresses himself down to action. But pu'ula means a accomplished thing, something that you do, and now it's here, and it's the extent of what a person can do and reach, even in the place where his influence now becomes even in a level which is not associated with him anymore. Und der Fahr ist recht, als man soll gamler nicht erkennen, in der Pu'ula, wer hat es getan. And therefore over here, in this expression of Pu'ula, when it's an action that goes so far from the person, that it's possible you don't even recognize at all the source of it, where it came from, who's the one that did this. Und der Rebbe. So therefore, now we can understand the difference between what it says in the letter and what it says in the explanation on the letter. When we're speaking about students that are close to their teacher and they're receiving from their Rebbe, what's being focused on is the words, the divrei Torah that he teaches, and his thoughts. In other words, it's his pnimius, the spiritual level of the teacher. That's the place where the attributes and the character of the tzaddik is expressed there. Ave, yireh, ve'amunah, his love for Hashem, his awe of Hashem, and his tremendous level of faith in Hashem. So that's the level that the students that are on the level of being called students, in other words, they're receiving on a spiritual level from their teacher. That's what the focus is on this level of it, the diburim and the machshava. However, when you want to express the greatness of who the tzaddik is, what's his accomplishment is the ikir eloi in pu'ulas hayashavet ba. Here, you see this mainly when it comes to the action, and specifically in the expression of pu'ula, that his influence extends to a place where it even is sort of not associated with him anymore. It goes so far. Well, the atzmius from tzaddik, here, the very essence of the avodah of the tzaddik, gitzach, where is that expressed? Nit azoi in the inyanim v'ashpois and v'alaches is niker milos avidosai. It's not expressed as much in those matters of the spiritual depth of his avodah, where you can see in its content how the level of who the tzaddik is expressed here. It's still related to him, and it's on a level that expresses who he is. The fact that the tzaddik, his tzidkus is so great that it reaches even to a place which is not associated with him. And it's a level which does not express who he is. And even there, the tzaddik's influence reaches. That's the pu'ula. In other words, his avodah is with so deep, it's the essence of who he is, not the spiritual expression or revelation of who he is. The very essence of the tzaddik is expressed when you see his effect, even in a place that does not express him. This is a similar point explained before regarding the focus regarding fulfilling mitzvahs. As the ratzon atzmi for mitzvahs, the deepest level of the mitzvah, the essential will of Hashem in the mitzvah, that's not expressing the spiritual aspect of the mitzvah, that's expressing a certain spiritual level or aspect of the mitzvah, being a keli to expressing something godly about it. No, it's dafka the maisa that expresses nothing. So what is the mitzvah here? It's the very essence of Hashem that's in the action of the mitzvah. So this explains why, when it comes to the letter, where the Alter Rebbe is focusing on the tzaddik, so he speaks about the ultimate hashpah of the tzaddik, which is in the pu'ulas hayashavet ba. That's what the Alter Rebbe brings this pasuk from the Haftarah. But in the beer, where he focuses on the talmidim, a student that's on a level that's a keli to be mekabel from the tzaddik, he speaks about his divrei Torah, the content and the depth and the machshava of the tzaddik. And now, based on this, the Rebbe concludes, this is what we find in general by the Rabbeim, unabhängig from the Baal Shem Tov, beginning with the Baal Shem Tov, as their erste is askus l'teves azulas, their first occupation as a Rebbe to tend to everyone's needs and for the benefit of everybody, is given to Tana Toiven Anidin Begashmias, was to be there to help and do a favor for another Yid in the physical sense. Not spiritually, first physically. Viditzel become a sichus the Rishimis von Rebbe dem Schwer, as related in the sichus and in the notes of the Frierdiker Rebbe, wie the Baal Shem Tov and Vaeira, the Baal Shem Tov and his colleagues, at Tzadikim an Estarim, the hidden Tzadikim, pflegen herumfahren zwischen Yidden, they would travel amongst the Yidden, gesucht wie zu helfen, sie begashmis, and they were looking for ways how they can assist and help Yidden physically. Und erst danach haben sie sich vernommen und helfen sie beruchnis. And only after that did they see to it to help Yidden even on a spiritual sense. So why was that the main focus, the Gashmis? The reason is, based on what we learned here, was an ashpas, toive Gashmis, because by helping another Yid physically, is nit azay kentik as he is verbunden mit a tzadik meilas avedasai. Here, what's being expressed is not a certain aspect or level of who the tzaddik is. His pnimi is the greatness of the tzaddik. Dieselbe Teuve will gekent an andere. You're looking at something that the tzaddik is doing physically that doesn't express him. The same kind of favor someone else that's not on the level of the tzaddik can also do. L'chayre, seemingly. Was is nit bedarges tzaddik, not on this level. On dafke di avede, but it's here. The fact that a tzaddik's influence reaches to such a far extent, even to a place that does not express him, but the tzaddik reaches there as well, is given the aschol von Zeiris Askus and Bnei Yisrael. This was the beginning, this is the foundation, this is the real essence of the tzaddik by helping another Yid, even physically. Val dafke in dem gitzach hareis zeir atzmias. It's specifically this that expresses the essence of who the tzaddik is, intending to the physical well-being of another Yid.